Hello, all you folks out there in YouTube land. I had intended to start work on a video critique of Saint Anita's tropes versus women in video games this week, but a conversation Kage had with one of the lovely Gamergate folks on Twitter suggested that it might be best to hold off a week or two after the most recent set of threats involving her. Much as it pains me to do that, I will. But be aware that I do intend to do that series of videos sooner rather than later, if only because no one should be immune from criticism. Not the journalists, not the media being reported on, and most certainly not the critics themselves, and that includes myself and everyone here. However, I do owe you a pile of woo destruction for the week, so I dug through the archives and found this little gem from One Fake Clouds in Sky. Compared to most other videos I've done this to, this one is short, just a bit over 9 minutes, and considering how far behind I've been the last couple of weeks, that should be a small mercy. As it is, I still haven't gotten far enough into BioShock Infinite to make for a worthwhile review, if only because I'm not very good at these first-person shooting games. Not enough time playing Doom when I was younger, I suppose. I'd watch Kage play. But not only is he not in practice with an Xbox 360 controller, he tells me that I can't critique a game I haven't played myself, or him. That's an ethical consideration, and I find that I must agree. If you haven't played a game, you should probably leave off talking about it. If you're not a gamer, you really don't have a place talking to gamers about games. Treating games like interactive movies is degrading to both mediums. Your views may vary, of course, but I find the argument compelling. Right. So, enough of my nattering. You came for the debunk, and it's time we got to it. As usual, there will be a link to the video below, so you can see the unadulterated inanity. For the record, Tabitha originally collected this video for inclusion in the Flat Earth Follies series, but since there doesn't appear to be an actual argument for Terra being flat therein, but instead, well, you'll see. Yes, that first bit is true, but you don't bother to give the context for the quote, and you use it as your central argument going forward. Clark was comparing an advanced civilization to one in comparatively primitive state, or the natives of North America when the Europeans arrived. There was considerable confusion when describing men on horseback, ships coming up over the horizon, or firearms. If I demonstrated my smartphone to one of those early settlers, they'd try and burn me at the stake. Give a computer to Galileo with a complete star chart and a word processor with which to keep his notes, and he'd be lost. The unknown intelligence that sent indestructible, geometrically perfect slabs as probes to the Sol system in that fiction no doubt believed these objects simple tools with which to monitor the developing species therein. If you read the later books, you even get some insights into their thinking. As for the claim that science fiction magic has any bearing on reality except to inspire others to meet it is unsubstantiated at best. The thing here is that you buy into your own narrative by proclaiming that science fiction is magic. How did that go again? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's it. Your claim here is that the unreality of science fiction makes things somehow real. I shouldn't have to point out the incoherence of this attempt at argument. You can't prove that it's impossible, and you think science fiction is magic. Science fiction pushes the boundaries of what we can imagine, and therefore pushes back at Clark's law. If we can imagine a faster-than-light drive, when one shows up with aliens attached to it, the answer of God magic the end won't be nearly as likely to happen, but instead a raised eyebrow and a bunch of nasty teeth if they've come to invade. Your followers will be toasted nicely and served with a bit of salt and pepper, but there will be a core of people that understand that it's not magic, will eventually understand what they're looking at, and find a counter for it. No idiocy required.
This camera, part of a flying laboratory, is recovered by Clyde Holliday of Johns Hopkins, who prepared it for its trip to the upper stratosphere. Rivaling the fantastic imagination of Jules Verne, the camera brought back a record of a flight into the heavens of a captured German V-2 rocket. At White Sands, New Mexico, the huge missile takes off. Air Force pictures show the rocket in flight, and the flying camera automatically takes over. The huge projectile drops the Earth behind at the tremendous speed of 4,000 feet per second. The rotation of the rocket causes the planet to spin before the lens, and the camera photographs the Earth 65 miles straight down. The horizon, 720 miles away, and the curvature of the Earth are astonishingly apparent in this still picture from the film. An observer...
Yes, it is. If you understand the least thing about shapes, you can look into the foreground part and see the planet curve in. At this point, however, you haven't seen the rest of the video, as the rocket by now is tumbling end over end and pitching wildly. In other single frames, the curvature is seen clearly when you look at the Terminator. The entire experiment was derived from the imaginings of Jules Verne, yes, which goes back to what I said earlier. His books were large-scale thought experiments, and this was a test of one of them, as were Clarke's, Asimov's, and Cargay's own material.
And the rocket could have seen San Diego, Salt Lake City, Kansas City, and San Antonio. Approximately 1,600,000 square miles of the Earth's surface was revealed. The rocket reached the 65-mile height in 3 minutes. This giant engine of destruction, designed by Hitler to annihilate Allied nations, now serves the worthy cause of peacetime research.
State here that Apollo 11 was the first real proof of this image of the Earth, but you neglected images shot from space by earlier missions, including Apollo 8 over Christmas of 1968, which took pictures from lunar orbit of Earth as it rose a couple of years earlier, and similar images taken from Apollo 10, which was tested lunar landing procedures in May of 1969. Apollo 11 didn't land until July of the same year. We had earlier high-orbit shots of Earth from Project Gemini prior to 1967. As it is, this image of the Earth isn't particularly accurate, as there's only vague shadows of land present, and not enough if that for the part of the globe in the shot. Pre-programming for the fake moon landing, you say? Bollocks. We knew before filming began what it looked like.
And it was recorded on the 18th of July. 1969.
Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great, over.
Do you remember this?
The 18th? Sure. Okay,
This bit is a hit piece trying to discredit lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin by showing a shocked look on his face. He doesn't look guilty. He looks dumbfounded.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Sure. Okay, Roger. Roger, Neil. We just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get the playback, we can sort of correlate what we were seeing. Thank you very much.
Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so... it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera. South America becomes...
Your red announcement thing there is unlikely to be from NASA, and if it were, how did anyone get their hands on it? Us, please. NASA has been in the habit of being in touch with their inner reporter almost from inception, and all of its footage is released to the public domain.
Visible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow. We can see the oceans with a definite blue cast, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth.
Roger, the ATC is working real well. The F-22 looks good, over. So Apollo 11, Houston, did you copy, over? ATC copied, Charlie. Roger, your transmissions the last couple of times have been about 2 by, over. Okay, how do you read me now? Roger, 5 by now.
Coastline.
Now we're coming in. Can't quite make out who that had.
Or 30, you've neglected to take anything into account, including that the camera was held by a human being. So the unsteady picture is a consequence of his motion. The camera will pick up major light sources, and if you down the cabin lighting and close the other windows, it would be dark enough to get a clear image. This is entirely valid photography. That thing you identify as a UFO. It's the dimmed cabin lighting reflecting off the damned window.
The secret to film is that it's an illusion, and it's an illusion that's created at 24 frames a second. You have the illusion of movement, you have the illusion of space and time, and ILM is concerned with creating that illusion.
I'd like to see your evidence, rather than your bald assertions. I haven't seen any yet, and at the rate you're going, there won't be any. Yes, he wrote it, from an idea Kubrick had based on an earlier short story Clark wrote, The Sentinel. The idea of satellites were known before the book was written, and the maths for geostationary satellites had already been done. I'm not entirely certain, but I believe that at that time there were already such satellites up there. Either way, a Homer transfer orbit wasn't a mystery. It is just science fiction, but it's hard sci-fi, which means that one only uses the things that matches what is already known, without extrapolation. Orbital platforms, chemical propulsion drives, all of this is easily explainable by the technology of the day. This in an explanation of the effect. Again, so what? They didn't have a vomit comet to shoot in, so one has to give that sense of weightlessness somehow. For the bitter hair later when the stewardess climbs the wall and goes in another hatch, they had a rig that turned the camera and the set.
The box office. In England, however, producer-director Stanley Kubrick and novelist Arthur C. Clarke were preparing a production that would challenge audiences and visual effects artists for years to come. It was the first big shot for Douglas Trumbull, the man who would go on to design the effects for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And it was the first time that audiences used to the reality of NASA's pristine imagery could truly experience the feeling of being on location, out there.
Well, basically, you want to have a moving camera platform. It's been done in the past, many, many years ago. They did what's called matched moves. Basically, it's when you combine two elements of film onto a single element of film to make them appear as though they were photographed at one time. The most simple example is a match shot where you have people in the foreground walking and talking on the ground, and you want to have a giant pumpkin behind them, but you don't have a giant pumpkin. you black out the area above them and paint in the giant pumpkin, and you put those two pieces of film together, and you have what appears to be a giant pumpkin and people. Well, the motion control aspect of it was added when you said, well, I want to pan the camera.
This footage comes from a pair of documentaries on movie making, showing how things are done in film, when you can't get a person into the Death Star trench.
Across the people in the pumpkin. And basically what it allows you to do is to take the people, photograph them, remembering your positional displacement per frame, so that if you pan 2 degrees per frame, it remembers that. And then you go shoot the pumpkin, and you pan 2 degrees per frame on the pumpkin. And when you put those two pieces of film together, it appears as though the camera move was made on both of the objects at the same time. That's putting the two elements together with a matched move.
The blue screen system had fallen into disfavor because of the extraordinary skill it required to achieve a satisfactory result. Again, the versatile optical printer was at the heart of the procedure. Dykstra and Edlund decided to resurrect one of the obsolete film formats of the early 50s. By shooting the models with the larger negative VistaVision camera.
This is not a NASA artist, but an individual probe maker putting the finishing touches on the model they used from 2001, A Space Odyssey. NASA had nothing to do with the making of that film, and the book was written in conjunction with the film. It was what Clark did afterwards that was seminal. Nice try.
They could minimize any grain buildup through the many compositing stages. Once the subject has been photographed against the blue screen, this optically neutral backing can be processed out, leaving the subject on a clear field, ready to be placed against a separately photographed environment. And when you print a blue screen shot onto black and white film, you end up with a set of protection mats, ready to preserve the area of the film in which the subject will ultimately appear. The classic Méliès black area trick continues to pop up in increasingly more sophisticated applications.
No, NASA has no need for stunts like this, as they can just go there and take real footage. In fact, they make regular launches to do exactly that. The International Space Station occasionally sends back a live feed of terror passing underneath it. They also use that same sort of technology to watch hurricanes and predict where they're likely to strike and when. Aha. Sure. How about some evidence? You've used movies to attempt to disprove science. More folks than NASA have been up there, and recently a Chinese probe returned footage from Lua. Are you going to tell me that the Cold War Soviet Union, the United States, and now the Chinese have been in complete collusion for more than half a century? That's a very large conspiracy for such a little thing, you know. A conspiracy that size would collapse under its own weight in hours. That's it for this video. No evidence, just some leading questions and a handful of assertions. He doesn't bother to address the M signatures of the spacecraft in flight, nor the deep field radar both sides used to track object, and he fails to see the size and political instability of a conspiracy that size. Never mind corroborating robotic evidence coming out of China. Just goes to show, it doesn't pay to lie about something anyone can fact-check and then go out and see for themselves. I get the impression that some people look at how it could be faked, and then derive wild speculations about how cool it would be if their own imaginings were true. Then in classic Dunning-Kruger style, they start to believe that they are better at this sort of thing than people that have studied it their entire lives. Or myself. I know enough to know what the difficulties are in doing something like this, and I know that making the landings would have been far less technically challenging. It's not the footage, it's all the other things that go with a mission. Ignoring corroborating evidence will not make it go away. Fake clouds in sky. It just gives people critiquing your work a stick to beat you with. This one just happens to be the size and mass of a Saturn V, fully fueled and loaded to go to Lua. If you like what we're doing, and want to see more of it, please rate, comment and subscribe for even more fun things to come. If you would like to support the channel, please consider turning off ad block, or becoming a channel patron at the link below. These days, every little bit helps, and the more we can raise through the channel, the more time we can put into making and producing videos. As for the final week of our Woo Month campaign, please leave your votes in the comments to this video for what bit of egregious dishonesty and general fucktardery you'd like to see put to the question. At this point, nothing is sacred, and any peddler of woo is subject to criticism. Until next time, clear skies and happy debunking.